Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all here. I believe what we lack in number, we have like more of that in intellectual curiosity. And I know this is sort of very specialized topic, but at the same time, Charles IV, who we will hear about today, was actually voted the greatest Czech of all times. I don't know if you know that, but in 2005, there was this whole like TV program where people were supposed to vote, and he was really chosen number one. Who do you think was the second most popular Czech person? He was the third one. There was one in between, but also a president. So that's a Masaryk, yeah, Masaryk was number two. However, a curiosity, this was only in the second round. They had to redo everything because in the first round, who do you think won? And he was disqualified, so it actually didn't go through. Yeah, Zimmermann. In the first round of the greatest Czech of all time, it was Jara Zimmermann, who is a fictional character. That's why he was disqualified. And in the second round, it was Charles IV, who, as we will hear even more evidence tonight that he was a real historical person. So before we get to Charles IV, though, let me just say thanks to the support of two organizations that financially support our events, and that's the Bohemian Benevolent and Literary Association and the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all the individual donors. So thank you also for your contributions now or at any other event that you attended. You can also find us online. We have a website, there is a YouTube channel, and we record most of our events. So even this event, if you have somebody who maybe missed it, but they would like to watch it later, then we have Jen here who records everything, and it will be on our YouTube channel later on, again, thanks to the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the best way to learn about our events is really our Facebook channel, where we announce all the events that we have. And we have usually like one thing per month. So do that, Google us. There is, if you are interested in historical topics, there is one more event which might be of interest to you, and that's Anti-Nazi Theater on radio waves. We will have Philip Scheer from the National Museum of Prague, and he will be talking about Voskovec and Very during World War II. So this is something which is organized by the Czech Consulate General, I believe, but again, we like promote each other's events. So Wednesday, May 20th, actually, same day in 3 weeks from today, right? 3 weeks from today. So you're very much welcome to that one. So now, before we start talking about Charles IV, let me give you a few words about our presenter tonight. It's Václav Žůrek, who is a Czech medieval historian. He studied at Charles University at Faculty of Arts. As we found out today, we were probably classmates for a few years because he was in the history program. I was in Czech language and literature and linguistics program, and these are the two biggest programs at the Faculty of Arts. So lots of historians and linguists coming from that faculty. And then Václav got his PhD from Charles University and also from the School for Advanced Studies in Social Sciences in Paris. And he wrote a dissertation on the topic of using historical motives by monarchs, and especially by monarchs in the Kingdom of France and the Kingdom of Bohemia. And since 2008, he has been a research fellow at the Center for Medieval Studies at the Institute of Philosophy of the Czech Academy of Science. He focuses on many topics. Some of his things which he worked on are medieval rituals, especially coronations, also the reception of medieval bestsellers in the Czech lands, and most recently, it's political thought and verbal violence in late medieval Bohemia. So I wonder what inspired that topic. And he also actively engages in popularizing scientific knowledge, and that's something he will be doing tonight too. So today he is here because basically last year his book on Charles IV was translated to English, and it was published by Carolinum, which is Charles University publisher, and then here it's distributed by the University of Chicago Press. And the book is available for purchase here in the US, both on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So if you get inspired, if you like this topic, wanna read more about it, then you're very much welcome to search this book and buy it here. So let's hear from the author of the book himself, what we have known about Charles IV and what we have been told and taught is actually true, or if there is something new, if there are some new insights that maybe have been missed until today, and he will tell us about that.
Thank you very much, Vera. And thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me. I'm grateful to Czechoslovak Society for Arts and Sciences for this opportunity to present my book. I will send you the book. This is the exemplar for SVU, so I hope it will come back. I will take you to the 14th century. But however, I should start this story with this awkward moment, because I promised the book on Charles IV for the Jubilee 2016, 700 years of his birth, and I didn't finish it before, unfortunately. However, I spent the whole year 2016 giving lectures on schools and museums all over, preparing a documentary for Czech television and so on. And I realized, especially during many opportunities to hear politicians, actual Czech politicians talking about Charles IV during this Jubilee year, that I should write this book, but write it from other perspective than I thought before. And then I promised to the Czech publisher Nakladatelství Lidové noviny, because the Charles was really very present during 2016 in very much. And I asked myself, what is actually this, what is so interesting on his personality, and what we can learn from his time and from his reign and from his, let's say, what last until nowadays. And then I decided to write the book differently. So the first half of the book is just classical biography of Charles IV from his birth until his death. And the second half of the book is an analysis of his rulership style, what I call the rulership style. The points or characteristics which are special on his rule, his behavior, his decisions, his goals, and his program. Also, in case of Charles IV, the propaganda is very important. Also, the PR made on his court about himself. And that's what I tried to analyze in the second half of the book, as you can see from the contents. Because when we start now in the 21st century with the questions about why is Charles IV, as Vera told you a few minutes ago, so well, he was elected the biggest Czech in history. Why he is so popular? The first thing is, of course, that the Czechs have quite difficulties when dealing with 20th century history. That's why it must be not the first, but the Charles IV, someone from the old history who could be viewed as remembering of the medieval Czech state, or the king of Bohemia, which since the 19th century was very important for the idea of Czechoslovak Republic, from the Czech national awakening, and later for the Czechoslovak Republic as well. And some ruler from Middle Ages, of course, is not so conflicting. The memory on his over this 600 years is not so difficult. And also, what is quite important in the case of Charles IV is that he is very present in the public sphere in Czech Republic. You know that the university, the oldest and biggest university in Czech Republic, is called Charles University. Even a quite big town in western Bohemia called Karlovy Vary is called after him. Many castles are called after him. Charles Bridge, he's present also on the 100 Czech crown banknote and everywhere in public sphere, so he's very present. And this is also, I think, one of the reasons why he is so popular even nowadays. There are also different reasons which I will talk about later at the end. What I want to do now during this presentation is just summarize a bit the arguments of my book. So I start with just short biography of Charles IV, who was born in Wenceslas in 1316, but and who was the son of Elizabeth of Přemyslit family and John of Luxembourg, the Czech king. And when he was 7 years old, he was transported to France, to Paris, to the most notorious and glorious court of Europe. And he grew up there for 7 years, and he changed his name. He took the name Charles, which he used then until the end of his life. Then his father sent him to Italy, northern Italy, in Lombardy, where he should, for 3 years, try to build some governor space for Luxembourg family, which did not end up well. And finally, he came back to King of the Bohemia. And after, at the end of the life of his father, he was elected and crowned king of the Romans, so in the medieval empire. And later, after the death of his father, he became king of Bohemia. As you can see on the map, so the red space was the Kingdom of Bohemia and later medieval Czech lands, including Silesia, Lower and Upper Lusatia, and finally in Brandenburg. So this was the space which was under direct rule of Charles IV, but he was also the king of the Romans and later medieval emperor, which means that he was also the ruler of the whole space between these red lines, as you can see, and even here in the south, so in the so-called Holy Roman Empire, which was quite important. I will talk about it later. So what I try to show in my book, in the second half of the book, is what was the rulership style of Charles IV based on, and what was so characteristics of his politics, and why it could be interesting even today for us to understand the 14th century. This is one part of my argumentation, and the second one is, how is it possible that even in 21st century, when some scholars or politics are speaking about Charles IV, they are using the same words they were written about him in 14th century. So after like 650 years, his PR is still functional. This is incredible, you know, speaking about any PR agency. Try to speak to any PR agent today and ask him, do you have any program that will last for 600 years? Really? Yeah, well, that's the case of Charles IV. And what is it based on? So it's based on a few characteristical moments I will speak about in more depth. Piety, wisdom, rituals, use of the past, and patronage or foundational activities. So the first one, this is piety. This was, of course, we are in the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, 14th century Europe. The piety was absolutely necessary, and it was the part of the everyday life in Middle Ages, of course. But in case of Charles IV, this was something more. He was staged as very pious ruler by several means. When he was elected king of the Romans in 1346, it was not easy for him to really be respected as the ruler, but later he decided to strengthen his position by accepting the coronation in Rome to become a Roman emperor. And in order to prepare this journey to Rome and the propaganda around his position in the medieval Holy Roman Empire, he started to collect relics. You know, relics were parts of bodies of saints or objects touched by these saints, and Charles started to collect them, but very quickly, and the collection was very huge, like 100 in 2 years. More than 150 objects, more than 150 relics were collected in Prague, partly there were in cathedral, St. Vitus Cathedral at the Prague castle, and partly they were transported to Karlstein, the castle near Prague, built especially for this reason, to be placed to let there this collection of relics. And what you can see here, this is wall painting from Karlstein, from this castle near Prague, where you can see Charles collecting relics and then putting them in the coronation cross. Part of this and the public or ostensive piety of Charles IV, this was not only his personal piety, it was also a part of politics, as we can see in the case of veneration of Saint Wenceslas. Saint Wenceslas, a saint from 10th century, a Přemyslit ruler, who was venerated during the whole Czech history, of course, but in the 14th century, during the reign of Charles IV, it was much more important or intensive than before. What we can demonstrate, especially on this St. Wenceslas chapel in St. Vitus Cathedral, which you can still see today, and there is this statue of St. Wenceslas. On many occasions, Charles reminded that he was that he get the name of Wenceslas when he was born and changed it only later. And St. Wenceslas was also present in many important rituals, like during the coronation. You know that the crown of Czech kings is the St. Wenceslas crown. So also it's also part of the veneration of this sword, which was also a coronation sword of Czech Wenceslas, and here used to be a relic of St. Wenceslas. But it was not only Wenceslas, because Charles IV was Wenceslas and then later Charles, so he venerated also St. Charles, St. Charlemagne, quite problematic saint in Middle Ages, who was not really accepted in the 14th century and even not today very much. But Charles himself, he tried to support very much this cult of St. Charlemagne. These two paintings come from Karlstein, actually, and this is also this double meaning of this patron saints, like St. Wenceslas and St. Charlemagne. They were both presented at Charles' court as well as the patron saints, but also as the predecessors, because Charlemagne was the first medieval emperor in Holy Roman Empire, also later called Holy Roman Empire, and even the numeral 4th for Charles IV was counted after Charlemagne and his and other emperors, well, first, second, and third. And also this you can see today in Aachen as a part of the reliquary of St. Charlemagne, and even today there is a part of new town of Prague called Karlov after the monastery of St. Charlemagne. And so one thing was that he was a pious ruler, so he should deal with or be pious on many public occasions, and some of them are also a topic about them are relating some authors from his court, like this. What we can see here is the extract from the chronicle written on Charles' court about the story is quite not so long, but what is important here is that there is Charles IV who deals with a finger of Saint Nicholas, which was a part of the treasury of relics in Prague, and he cut a piece for him, and then later, because there were some blood on it, and you know the Saint Nicholas is a very old patron saint, dead for many centuries already. But even though there was this miracle, so Charles IV was himself part of the miracle, and then he brought the finger back, and and as you can see, it came back, and it looks like it never had been cut off. So, but this is just could be a banal story. But what we can read here is that some emperor, this specific Charles IV, was dealing with relics, which was forbidden for otherwise for other people than priests, of course, and even he was a witness and a part of this miracle in 14th century Prague. And it was not everything, because if you want to be publicly seen and respected as someone very pious and ostensibly pious, you can start a new program, a new occasion, like Charles did, so-called ostensio reliquiarum, or display of relics, every third Friday after Easter. There were this display of relics on the biggest square in Prague, today called Charles Square. There was this some kind of wooden tower, and there were presented relics from this treasury, from the 150 relics, and they were shout, what is this relic comes from, and so and even if it's hard to believe today, but it was the biggest action in Prague in the second half of 14th century. Thousands of people were coming to Prague, which was also important for the economy of Prague, of course, because they should be fed, they should drink something, stay somewhere, etc. And this also was staged at the biggest square in Prague. So this was also a part of this politics, how to present Charles as pious ruler. And finally, during the reign of Charles, the six important patron saints, this sixth group was, let's say, presented together on many occasions. You can see it on the cathedral here, on this mosaic, or on the votive painting of Jan Očkov Vlašim. So Saint Wenceslas and his grandmother Ludmila, then Saint Vitus, the patron of Czech Archbishopric and later Archbishopric, as well as Saint Adalbert, then Saint Procopius and Saint Sigismund. And these six were the only patron saints of Bohemia until the Baroque time, when John of Nepomucen was also saint. So this was the piety, but this was not the only important part. The other important part, which I think and I believe and I try to show you, was the wisdom. So to present Charles IV as a wise king. And you can do this through several ways. You can support education, but Charles also was an author. He has written many works. He had language skills. and also a think tank of scholars and educated people around him. Of course, in 14th century, it was not so rare that the ruler was able to write and read. But what we know is that he was really able to write because he wrote few pages which survived until today. The most important is this one. This is a note on a fragment of Gospel of St. Mark. And what is interesting for me is if you look at this beginning, there is Ego Carolus Dei Gratia Romanorum Rex Semper, etc. But he forgot to write there the quartus, that he is just the fourth, so he write it later here, just like we do today when we make a mistake. And what we can see also is that his hand was not so much used, but he was able to write. The most important thing when you want to present yourself as a wise ruler who is interested in education is to found a university, as Charles did. 1348, he founded the university, Charles University, my alma mater, and this is the deed of the founding diploma of the university. And the university was based on Parisian model, so there was all 4 faculties possible in Middle Ages. So Faculty of Art, of course, Faculty of Medicine, Law, and Theology, which was the only one in Central Europe. Generally, this was the first university in Central Europe, but not every university in Middle Ages has the right to have the Faculty of Theology. Faculty of Theology was only in Paris, Oxford, Cambridge, and Montpellier, and it was all. And the reason was that there were not enough professors for theology. This was quite difficult. Even in Prague, it was difficult, but it somehow started in these 40s, 50s, and later the Prague University became quite important, as you can know from the beginning of 15th century, Jan Hus and this whole reform, which started as a discussion on the university, on the Faculty of Theology. And they were also the Parisian model was also used for 4 nations, Czech, Bavarian, Saxonian, and Polish nation, but the principle was not ethnic, but regional, so from the north, south, east, and west. It's also quite important. And why do you found a university? Of course, it's not only to be famous as a founder, it's much more practical. You need, as a ruler, you need qualified, educated people in your service, and the easiest way to have it is to have university in your capital, in your main town, where your court is, because otherwise, before the foundation of Prague University, all the students should, or who wanted to study at the university, should go to Paris or to northern Italy, which is quite far away, and it's also expensive. The idea was quite progressive, but very, very quickly other rulers around realized that the idea is great to have your own university. And you can see in Krakow, just in 60s, there was founded a university in Vienna, in Krakow, in Buda, and later in Heidelberg, in Rome, etc. And Prague was in difficulties in the concurrence of these other universities, and something quite important to say about Charles IV is he didn't like to spend money. He also had not much money actually, because his politics was quite expensive. So the university was also quite well, not wealth. And in 60s, when he saw that even in Vienna there is new university in Krakow, and the professor started to go to other university, he decided finally to pay something also for the university, and founded the first college called Carolinum. This is a part of the university today, and later the Prague University was also organized accordingly to these colleges, like the university in Paris and other cities in Western Europe. Of course, in order to present himself or be presented as wise, it's not only that you found a university and you have these students and scholars in Prague, but also you can find some poet who write a poem about you, telling how wise you are. And this is the case of Heinrich of Mügel, a German poet from the 14th century, who wrote a poem, Der Meide Krans, about Charles IV judges the arts. And of course, the most important finally was theology, which was, of course, comes very well together with this idea of faculty of theology in Prague, and theology is the most important because you have the pious ruler, and if you have the pious ruler, so the theology is the most important, and this is actually the main idea of this poem. But what you can see in this extract is that he is explaining to the emperor, the poet is explaining to the emperor that he should be more wiser than the people you are ruling, and that's also a part of the legitimacy, that you are wiser than your subjects. I said that it was not rare that rulers were able to write and read, but what was quite rare, that Charles was able to write a book, or in this case the so-called Vita Caroli IV, so the story of his youth, where he explained how he became the king of the Romans and what he did, and how chosen he was from the very beginning of his life, and how he was under the God's protection from during this time until 1346, when the Vita Caroli ended. And this is not the only thing Charles wrote. He wrote also a legend of St. Wenceslas, where Wenceslas is presented exactly as a ruler that Charles wanted to be in 14th century, and there were also other works associated with Charles, at least in medieval manuscripts, that he takes part on their writing, like the Chronicle of Přibík of Radenin, or the legislation Majestas Carolina, or coronation order. And all of these were written in Latin, which is not surprising for 14th century, but very quickly they were also translated into Czech and also German in 14th century. So, and when we are speaking about Vita Caroli, this is quite unique work actually, because this is a work where Charles speaking to his successors, saying, I will now explain you how to be a good ruler, and how I did became the great ruler. And even though it was not easy for me, I did it, and God protected me, and I was chosen to be king of the Romans and king of Bohemia. So this is basic of the story of Vita Caroli, which is very special as a text from 14th century, and it was or it's influenced every historian's writing about Charles IV until today, until my book, of course, because it's very rich as a material. And what is also quite interesting is that Charles was polyglot, so he was able to speak many languages. We have many testimonies from 14th century, from his time, that he was able to speak Czech, French, Italian, German, Latin. But if we look at his life during the youth, it's not surprising that he was able, because after 7 years in Paris and 3 years in Italian, even a football player is able to speak these languages. So Charles was also able to speak French and learn French and Italian. And he learned also Czech and German, which were the two languages spoken in medieval Bohemia, especially on the court, and Latin was the only language used for education in his time. So if someone wanted to write something like a book, story, or poem, he should mostly use Latin and not other languages. So he was able to use all of them as we know it, and it was also quite practical, because we know he had 4 wives. The first was a French princess, Blanche of Valois, and we know from the chronicle of Peter of Zbraslav that Peter of Zittau, sorry, that she was asking which language he should learn by coming to Prague. And the answer was German, which was more practical than Czech. It could be surprising, but it's not actually. And the other 4 wives were from German-speaking families. So we can say that very probably, and it makes sense, the most speaking language at the court of Charles IV was German, because not only because it was wives, but also there was a German, quite important German minority in every lands of Czech crown, and he was also not only king of Bohemia, but also king of the Romans, or later emperor. So he was the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, dominantly German-speaking space, and also, as we know, when he promoted in 1356 so-called Golden Bull for the empire, so a legal code for the empire, there was in the last chapter this part on linguistic skills, on future princes from the Holy Roman Empire, and as you can see, they automatically speak German, but they should learn Latin, Italian, and Slavic, which should be probably Czech in this context, but it's not set. So there is just this Slavic. So you can see that for Charles as a ruler, the ability to understand the subject was seen as important part of the politics. Another part of this, let's say, rulership style of Charles IV were rituals and use of the rituals. The most important, of course, the most important ritual in the Middle Ages was the coronation, and not only in Middle Ages, of course. The monarchy has it even today, as you can see in England and elsewhere. So the ritual, the coronation, was the most important and most significant ritual during the reign. And Charles asked to write a new coronation order for Bohemia, which is a text we still have in Latin as well as in Czech translation, as you can see here, for instance. And there is also this story about the St. Wenceslas crown made for Charles IV during his reign, which is still a part of this historical identity today, and it's some object linked to the Charles IV, and also playing an important role in the memory of Charles IV today. So I will show you later. As far as I know, Charles was the medieval record man in coronations, because I didn't find anybody else who was 6 times crowned during his reign. In Prague, the King of Bohemia, twice in Holy Roman Empire, because the first one was not in Aachen as it should be, and it was problematic. So he did it again, twice. Then in Milano, King of Lombardy. Then in Rome, to the coronation to emperor, of course. This is important. And then later in Arles, in the so-called Imperial Burgundy. So the 6th time, and this was not everything. He even organized another 10 coronations during his reign. So you can get from this list that the coronation was quite important to him, and he liked to organize it whenever he had a possibility. Like when he got a new wife, he brought her to Rome in order to make her coronate again, or no, not again, but coronate her in Rome or in Aachen for the Holy Roman Empire. Some of these rituals were quite special, like this one. This is a reading during Christmas. It was made up at the Charles' court in 1346, and afterwards he did it every year, every Christmas, wherever he was, when he was not sick. And this was quite special. We have this nice image from the Grand Chronique de France, from when he this is also a testimony which can explain us how important it was. So during the coronation mass, it was the 25th of December, when it was the coronation, the Christmas mass, and the Charles, as the emperor, stand up with the drawn sword and with the crown on his head, and he read this part of the gospel. So in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire world, etc. That's the beginning of the story of Jesus Christ and his birth. And why it is so important, and why I was showing this to you, because it was actually this ritual, this act was against the rules in Middle Ages, in the medieval church, because you can't bring weapons in the church. You can't let your crown on other time than the coronation on your head, because there you should show some humility. But this was not the case. It was apparently the Pope has given his yes, and it was possible. Of course, you also show to the people that you are able to read when you are thinking this part of the gospel. And what is the most striking on this ritual is that when Charles IV wanted to visit his nephew, the French King Charles V, and he wanted to spend Christmas in Paris, but the French king knew that Charles wanted to make this ritual. He asked him to stay for Christmas in an empire. So Charles IV spent Christmas in the empire in Cambrai, which was in 14th century part of the empire, because the French king didn't want to that the emperor make this ritual on the French soil, because this could mean that he is something more than the French king, and the French official politics says that the French king is the emperor in his kingdom, so the king is not more than French king. So you can see that the symbolic value, the meaning of this small ritual could be that important, and they were negotiating to stay in the empire. And it did not end really with his death, or it ended with his death. And as far as we know, the funeral of Charles IV was quite a big ritual. There was a procession through the whole city from the Prague castle until the Vyšehrad and back, with several stops during the 3 nights. And it all took 11 days, this public ceremony. And Charles was finally buried in the cathedral. And when we are talking about how much present is Charles in nowadays Czech Republic, but also in, let's say, in Central Europe, we should remember that he was quite a founder. He founded not only university and started to build stone bridge over Vltava, which is now called Charles Bridge, but also the cathedral is linked to his reign partly. There is a Karlstein treasury castle near Prague, but also other castles and many monasteries. But the most important founding act of Charles IV was the foundation of the new town of Prague. You should imagine that this was Prague when he started to reign, and this was Prague when he ended. So this whole, the new town of Prague, was the biggest urban project in the history of Prague, actually. This is also, and it's comes together with foundation of many monasteries and churches, and it changed the city of Prague until the end of 19th century. Of course, if we are talking about court of Charles IV, he tried to invite many scholars and educated people to his court, but also artists, because this was also an important part of the legitimacy to have artists who are working for the House of Luxembourg, for Charles IV himself. And we have today many objects made for Charles, especially architectures. So, like the stone bridge or bridge tower, part of the cathedral, and these castles I was talking about, but also some small artistic objects are still quite interesting, like this one. I saw it yesterday here in Morgan Library. You can see it there, here in New York, and there is a adoration of Magi. And many art historians, I'm not an art historian, but it seems to me that it's quite obvious that this should be a crypto portrait of Charles IV himself. He was quite, it's easy to recognize Charles IV, maybe because he started this politic of official portrait. We know that he was portrayed even at the end of his life the same way. So maybe because he had after some injury, he had some medical problems, even with his face. So he started to use the official portrait, and this is something which looks quite similar what we can see. And this is just a few other examples of institutions he founded. As Vera said already, Charles was elected the biggest Czech, největší Czech in the TV poll. You can see here the other, of course, which is something quite typical for Czech historical culture, is that the Middle Ages is important. You can see among 10 most important Czechs, there are 3 people from Middle Ages. So not only Charles IV, but also Jan Hus and Jan Žižka. Surprisingly, Žižka was the 5th and Hus the 7th, but okay. And this is quite unique. Only few other countries has this, or the medieval culture and history is so important for them. But of course, in Hungary, Matthias Corvinus was elected the biggest Hungarian, and we can find another examples as well in Romania. But this is, I'm speaking here about Charles IV, and this is exactly an argument for this non-problematic ruler from Middle Ages, from 14th century, could be the biggest Czech because it's far away. We don't want to deal with 20th century politics so much because this is difficult. So let's vote for someone from old times, old good times, when the King of Bohemia was quite important and we were important, etc. And also this idea of Czech Republic or Czechoslovak Republic and later Czech Republic is also very linked, or it comes together with this idea of the medieval Czech state. And the most important objects from this time are of course the coronation jewels. And the most important among coronation jewels is the crown of St. Wenceslas, and this is something, an object which comes from the time of Charles IV. And even today, you know maybe that there is this display of jewels. Now is every year, so it becomes quite often, and it's not that that mystical as it was before. But there is still this need for 7 keys from 7 most important people in the Republic. So it's some kind of display of relics of Czech Republic. Let's see here. And also, if we are talking about some historical memory of Charles IV, I think that the movie Night on Karlštejn, Noc na Karlštejně, is one very influential piece of art because everybody knows it, and because it's written after the image of Charles IV there is very much based on medieval testimonies and very much based on the idea which was since František Palacký propagated in the historical literature and historical books. And this is something what even today, after this 50 years, influenced very much the idea of Charles IV today. And this is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't have any exemplars to sell here, but it should be available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Thank you very much, and I'm here for your questions and notes.
Dobry večer. I'm just curious, he had 4 wives.
Yes.
That's getting close to King Henry VIII. Was it tolerated to have multiple wives then, or?
No. They were not at the same time.
So did he get divorced and then?
No, they died. The first 3 died, and well, then.
Probably in childbirth.
Some of them, yeah.
Or plague.
As well.
And
the first one, probably Blanche of Valois, probably plague, and of Palatinate during the childbirth, and the other I'm not sure, and the last one, overstay him, yeah, longer than Charles, yeah.
And could you tell us how many children he had and who was his immediate successor, please?
Okay. I can, of course. He had many children, 3 sons, which who survived until the let's say, later age, and the successor was Wenceslas IV, who became a king of Bohemia and king of the Romans as well. So the ruler in so-called Czech lands of the Czech crown, so Bohemia, Moravia, Silesia, and Lusatia, and also the Holy Roman Empire. Is that a good? No, it's not a good king, Wenceslas. Well, no, I don't want to judge him, but I just should say he has a bad reputation to be a bad king. But the good king Wenceslas from the Christmas Carol, it's the Saint Wenceslas, actually from 10th century, the patron saint. Yeah.
Can you show his slide? You have good. We saw good king Wenceslas in the beginning. Svatý Václav.
Okay.
That's like very popular carry. This one. So this is the good king.
Yeah, this is the story of this saint is the basics of the Christmas Carol.
Okay, I know Maida, you said that this talk sort of very nicely coincides with 2 exhibitions of Gothic art. So can you tell us more about that?
Well, yes, our speaker said he's not an art historian, so we didn't get much, but there is an exhibit. Of course, we had the great Charles IV exhibit. I don't know what year it was at the Metropolitan Museum.
2005.
I'm sorry?
2005.
Right. So now there's an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum. I haven't seen it yet, but it's on drawing the Gothic. So I imagine there's some reference to Charles IV and the architect of St. Vitus, etc., Peter Parler. I don't know for sure, but I recall in the previous exhibit that there was an incredible drawing from Vitus Cathedral, and I was shocked to learn that there was such advanced, drawn architecture. I think we always thought of it more as just something that came from the people, but can you make any statement about what you know about the role of architects in the work of Charles? And that your slide went over the other buildings associated with Charles, so we didn't get a chance to see, but anything you want to tell us about it might fit. The other exhibit that's in town at Bard Graduate Center is on the Gothic Revival, so that's not directly relevant here, but it's just a Gothic moment as far as architecture is concerned. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. I remember this exhibition, Prague, Crown of Bohemia, 1347-1437. This was the official title of this exhibition in Cloisters, then in Metropolitan Museum in 2005. And next year it came to Prague, right, on the castle. The curator was Barbara Drake-Boehm and Jiří Veit.
Right.
And this is also quite typical that because Jiří Veit, he prepared even for this Jubilee 2016 another exhibition on in Prague on Charles IV, because there are many objects that could be really displayed as a nice and
right, with all the relics, for example.
Yeah, all the relics, all the gold, and nice manuscripts, of course. And even though we don't have many manuscripts from his library, from Charles's library, but from later and from this time. And also, this is important, Peter Parler, the main architect, who we know by name and who founded his own school in Prague by building the Tower Bridge. So next to at the end of the stone bridge, Charles Bridge nowadays, now called, there is a tower of the bridge, and this is the first work of Peter Parler, as far as we know. Mm-hmm. And this is the only one we know really, or there were Matthew of Arras who started the cathedral, but quite quickly he died, and Peter Parler continued this work. And what we know from cathedral as this let's say, typical pieces of art of Charles IV's era are from Peter Parler, and he influenced very much the whole Gothic architecture in Central Europe.
So beyond this
Yeah,
area.
beyond. Yeah, it's not only Prague, but even in other, and they were even reproduced this new technique of architecture from Prague, then later on in Nuremberg, for instance, or in other cities. So, and this is the architecture, of course, is a part of this building program. Let's say when Charles founded many buildings in different places, not only in Bohemia. Also, there is a castle Monte Carlo in Italy. It's not the Monte Carlo famous in Monaco. It's the other one, quite small, but still nice. There are also in Nuremberg many important, like the churches founded during his life and influenced by him, as far as we know, and from this Prague workshop of Peter Parler, or the Castle Lauf near Nuremberg, or this Kasperg you can see on right here. Sorry, this is a nice castle in Šumava in South Bohemia. So that's it. Yeah, what we know especially is that it's what comes from the workshop of Peter Parler. He was not, of course, not able to do everything himself, but he was the head of this workshop, and not only architecture but also sculptor, because they were many. What you know maybe are the heads from the cathedral, where is not only Charles but also his wives, his father, and so on, and these were made by Peter Parler, as far as we know.
All right. Well, thank you. I just wanted to be refreshed on that as an important part of what Charles IV was spreading in the arts. Thank you.
So thank you very much for this presentation. It was really very, very interesting. I'm curious to learn more. So you were saying, what you were mentioning, I mean, the pillars of his rulership about piety and education and so on. But what about his political power play or so? So if I remember correctly, his rise to power was not undisputed. There were competitors in the beginning after his father died for the kingdom, maybe also definitely for the emperor, for the Holy Roman Empire position, so to speak. So could you say something about how his political, his struggle, I mean, how he was in terms of using his power, his political ambition and so on?
Yeah. Well, Charles himself was very pragmatical. He did important decisions very quickly and changed alliances very quickly if it was better for him. So he was very pragmatical. This is important to say. His start, especially in the Holy Roman Empire, in Bohemia, he was the heir of the only king, so this was not a problem. But he was actually elected anti-king against Louis the Bavarian, who died then during the hunt of the bear or something, I'm not sure, which was in Prague, and the court of Charles IV explained as a sign that the God has chosen Charles for the king. And this is also the whole story of the Vita Caroli is how he was chosen, how these people against him, his opponents, miraculously died during some injury or something, or how there was an attack against him, but it was during Easter, and the poison food, there was a poison food, but he, as a good Christian, he did not eaten before the Easter Mass, so he miraculously survived, and this is another sign that he has been chosen to be the king of the Romans, and so on. So this was so there was this part of the of the story of someone who is really chosen under the God's protection, and on the other side there was someone who was able to change his alliance during hours, who even supported some guy who came in Brandenburg and said, after 15 years after the death of the last Margrave from the Ascanian family, came some guy and said, I'm this last Margrave. I just spent 15 years in Holy Land, and then now I'm back. And this was very, very tricky and very problematic. But Charles used him, support him for a few years, and then when it was not useful for him anymore, he just said, okay, but that's nonsense, you know, the Margrave died 15 years ago, and this is just some guy from this village. Well, let's end this story. You know, so the pragmatic part of his politics was very important, and he changed very quickly. He was able to make the decision. And also, what I wanted to say, maybe what is also important, quite characteristic for him, he spent a lot of his reign on the way somewhere. He was in Rome, Avignon, Paris. He spent a lot of time in Empire, in Nuremberg and elsewhere, because apparently he was quite charismatic and he was able to persuade people by negotiating with them in person. So that's why he, even at the end of his life, he was quite old and ill, but he went to Paris, which was quite far away, so the voyage of many weeks, but he took it because he was persuaded that this was important, and he really did this diplomatics face to face, which is, you know, if we compare it with other rulers, like the French king during the Middle Ages, he stayed in France the whole reign, mostly, or the King of England stayed in England. But this, and this was not only case of Charles. This was some characteristic of the whole Luxembourg dynasty. His father was also all the time on the way somewhere, and even his two sons, so Wenceslas and Sigismund, they also spent a lot of time on the way to make the politics in place and face to face to people they wanted to negotiate with.
And that's actually interesting, because maybe he didn't have a parallel in medieval times, but the first Czech president, Masaryk, was very much known for valuing this face-to-face diplomacy, and he basically created the country by traveling around the world and getting support. So the second greatest Czech, they seem to be similar in that. Okay, other questions? Okay.
Thank you. This may be a difficult question to answer, I'm not sure, but in your research, earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that there's a lot of propaganda that comes to us through the ages, and that's probably true for most kings throughout history. But is there anything that came apparent to you in your research over the years for this book that was not consistent with the propaganda? Any controversies or maybe some information from alternative sources and rivals who may have a different perspective on him?
Yeah, of course. He was not able to control everything, of course, and there are many, you know, mostly what we know from 14th century Europe are either chronicles or some diplomatic materials like diplomas and deeds, and then some letters. You know, so generally speaking, I'm generalizing. And many of these chronicles were written in some German towns, and they were quite critical. There are also critical chronicles from northern Italy, from Florence, for instance. They are also very critical to Charles IV. So this is what was he able maybe to control was the production, literary production on the Prague court, and let's say in central Bohemia or in Bohemia maybe. And quite striking example is that he was injured. 1351, Charles was very heavily injured, and we don't know nothing. We don't know what happened, where. All we know that he wrote to Pope that he's not able to move, he should stay at home. And then what we know is from anthropologists from 20th century, and they studied his bones, his skeleton, and apparently the injury was very difficult for him. Even the teeth were broken and the chest and everything. So, and he survived somehow, but apparently somehow controlled the information about this injury, and we know nothing. Not even from these chronicles written about his life in Prague on his court, where are information about the years before and the years after, but not this. And this is also maybe the reason for this official portrait, that he was, maybe his face was somehow damaged, and so maybe this is the reason why they started to use the official portrait or the idealized portrait of Charles IV, like we can see on this 100-crown banknote. And the reality was different, but well, it was not maybe problematic. So this is maybe this the scale of the control he was able. But of course, it doesn't mean that everything is positive for him. But what comes from the court of Charles IV, from the people he hired to write about Czech history, to write about his time, to write about Přemyslit history or something Czech, this is positive. This makes a whole picture, very complex. That Charles is someone who came from the Přemyslit family and also the Luxembourg family. Then he was chosen to be the emperor. That he is someone who is very much based in the Czech history, Czech, this continuation of the Přemyslit who reigned, so the family who reigned forever, the Czechs, and this is the official image, the official story of Charles IV, who was controlled by him, and this is what comes from his court. But there are also other sources, other opinions, but they are not that influential for the modern image of Charles IV in Czech Republic. In Germany, it's different, because since the Maximilian III, the emperor, he said, okay, it was this awful reign of Charles IV who ruined the central power of the emperor in empire. So, and this is a very different story, which is narrates in German historical textbooks, for instance. But this Czech history, the Czech image of Charles IV is very much influenced by this PR made during his life and made on his court.
So I have a follow-up to that. So even when you have this super control, like image, public image, there are still like legends and people come up with things. And there are two like things which I think like almost every Czech child knows. And even when we taught kids here in the Czech school in Astoria, this is the one thing which everybody remembered, even though the teacher, she mentioned it just in passing. And that's the one thing which everybody remembered. So I want to know your opinion on those two myths. If there is any like truth to them or if it's a complete urban legend. So one of them is that when they were building Charles Bridge, they to make it like really like firm and hold together, they put like egg yolks in it, and that's being like repeated, and I don't know where it comes from. So is there any truth to that or not? And the other one is the injury you mentioned. So supposedly that was because he had this love like for these like night fights, like when they go against each other with like this not sword, how you call it, like a lance.
Yeah.
And he was not supposed to play it, but he loved it. He loved the adrenaline of it. And so that's how he got injured, but he didn't want anybody to know. So Finally, we have a historian to ask.
Okay, so the first one, it's true actually. They found some
Okay.
remnants of this eggs in
Egg yolk, yeah.
egg yolk
Or the
in-
whole egg, maybe.
No, well, what you find today is just the rest of it, but there should be some of it. So, and as you know, maybe from the kitchen, it helps to make it tougher. And apparently, this was also used in Middle Ages. Well, as far as I know, a few years ago, someone made an analysis and said, yes, it's true.
Okay. Okay.
And the second one, this legend about the tournai or something, well,
Tournament,
forbidden tournament, or that it was problematic for him to be to participate on tournament. We know that in 1346 the Pope even criticized him in a letter that he should not participate in tournament anymore because he is now king, and this is not fine. Just like not to dance with women on some ball in Basel, and this is also not okay for a king. And so it's possible, but as I said already, we don't know. But it could be, of course. And there is also there's a book, the whole book about the injury of Charles IV, from a professor of some face anatomy, I think. I'm not sure. Jiří Ramba, yes. And he tried to reconstruct even what was the injury, and he said, yeah, that's possible. That he fell out from the horse, but this
so
is
not
also
that he got pierced, but it's more like he fell.
Yeah. Well, there are actually finally they found many injuries on his skull, so he apparently used to participate on
like
tournaments,
all the injuries.
all the injuries, and this could be from the fight, but yeah, well, but what is more maybe important in this context from the book of Jiří Ramba was that this was a miracle that he survived, because he was apparently not able to eat for some time because of the teeth. They should be taken back together, put back together with some golden thread and so on. So it's just quite a difficult operation. And not only in Middle Ages, but especially in these times, if you were not able to eat, you can't really survive. But he did for other 40 years or 30. But we don't know about this.
So after his injury, he lived for 30 more years.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Oh, so he had like
almost,
this phase,
yeah,
and he still managed all this.
But because this was 1351, and he died 1378, so almost 30 years after. So apparently he was able to survive.
Okay.
Yes, the cause of death is quite typical. He broken his leg in. What's the name? This is the typical fracture of old people.
Oh, here.
Yep. Yeah, the hip. Yeah. And then he should lie in bed for several weeks, and he got pneumonia, and this is how ended his life. Yeah.
So maybe anybody else has any other question? Okay, you can still ask after. So let's thank our speaker for tonight. Thanks all of you for coming. Yeah, and
thank you.
Feel free to ask more questions. There is some wine, so you can still ask.